Ahead and get started. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Petra Sultan, the Director of Advocacy and Education for Thrive, the Alliance of Nonprofits for San Mateo County, and welcome to Thrive's Candidate Forum for the newly formed Congressional District 15. My colleague Yahaira Ortega will explain how to access the Spanish interpretation and live captioning.
Yes, hello. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Okay. To hear this forum in Spanish, you will click the interpretation logo on the right-hand side. Para escuchar este foro en español, haga clic en el icono de globo a la derecha. Next slide. To turn on the real-time transcription, click the More button on the bottom right to enable live transcript. Thank you.
Thank you, Yahaira. About Thrive. Thrive is a trusted network of over 200 nonprofit partners, organizations, government entities, foundations, businesses, and community leaders with a shared commitment to strengthening the nonprofit sector, thereby improving the quality of life in San Mateo County. Thrive unites the voice and influence of nonprofits, helps build their capacity, and enables effective cross-sector collaboration. We're co-hosting this event with several of our partners, including San Francisco Peninsula People Power, the Center for Independence of Individuals with Disabilities, Belhaven Action, Peninsula for Everyone, Filipino Bayanihan Resource Center, and Bay Area Community Health Advisory Council. Thrive is a nonpartisan and non-endorsing organization. The purpose of this forum is to give all the candidates running to represent District 15 the opportunity to introduce themselves to voters and present their positions on the most pressing issues for nonprofits and for their communities. Thrive values voter engagement and voter turnout, and this is one of many ways that Thrive encourages greater civic participation. We invite you to join us in other upcoming candidate forums, which you can find on our website, thrivealliance.org. This event will be recorded in both English and in Spanish and will be available afterwards in Thrive's YouTube channel and on our website. I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that our work takes place on the ancestral and unceded lands of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples. The format for this afternoon's forum is as follows. Each candidate will start with a 2-minute introduction. The order of these introductions has been randomly determined. Subsequent questions will be asked in rotation, allowing each candidate to speak first. Each of our co-hosting organizations will introduce themselves and then ask a question of the candidates. The candidates will have 90 seconds to answer each question. Halfway through, we'll have a series of short answer questions, kind of like a stretch break, that the candidates will have 25 seconds to respond to. At the conclusion of all of the questions, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. The order of the closing statements has also been randomly assigned. We're not taking questions from the audience. The Q&A function is available if you have technical issues, but please refrain from using it to comment on the candidates or on their positions or to make any endorsements in keeping with the nonpartisan nature of this event. And please note that we will not be asking questions about the environment or about climate justice, despite the fact that these are very important issues, because the candidates have all participated in a forum that Thrive co-sponsored, which focused solely on those issues. You can find the recording on our website under candidate forums. At this time, I'd like to welcome the candidates in alphabetical order. Emily Beach, David Canepa, Gus Mattammal, Kevin Mullin, and Ferenc Pataki. The candidates will now proceed with their 2-minute opening statements, beginning with Gus.
Thanks so much, Petra, and thank you to Thrive Alliance for bringing us together today. In 2000, I graduated with a degree in business from the Yale School of Management. I chose that school because from its inception, it conceived of a business education as requiring an understanding not just of the private sector, but also the public sector and the nonprofit sector. We learned to view private, public, and nonprofit as a three-legged stool, 3 equal partners, each bringing unique strengths to the table. As a businessman, I've brought that perspective to my own work. For example, We've been partners for a dozen years with mission graduates up in the city, providing pro bono classes for their students, some of which I've taught personally. Down here on the peninsula, we've worked over the years with many families, including many Peninsula Bridge families, on a you pay the cost that makes sense for your family basis. That arrangement allows those families access to the same services that wealthier families in the area have access to, but also offers them the dignity of knowing that it's a hand up and not a handout. Those are just a couple examples of the ways I've addressed opportunity gaps using private and nonprofit approaches together. And as your congressman, I'll continue that work by using the visibility of my office to bring together our district's private and nonprofit organizations to help create more and deeper partnerships, to build on the work that you're already doing. And as a conservative, bringing citizens together to engage them in problem solving is exactly what I want to see more of in this country, which means this district has an opportunity to lead America. So I look forward to working with you. And know this, I will always treat you as equal partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily?
Thank you so much for having us here today. And thank you for Thrive and all the wonderful community-based organizations and nonprofits who are sponsoring this. You all are trusted leaders in your community. You're at the grassroots level, making a difference in people's lives every day. And I admire that so much. I'm excited for the conversation today to demonstrate to you that I've got the right experience and values to be your next Congresswoman. I think you'll find my experience very relatable. I've been a grassroots community volunteer. I've run a nonprofit organization, and I've spent 7 years in local government. We've got big challenges in the 15th Congressional District and quite frankly, in our country, but with the right leadership and the right coalitions, we can make huge progress. We can heal our planet. We can tackle income and wealth inequality. We can dismantle systemic racism, and we can restore trust in our institutions. Politics as usual isn't working so well in Washington, and I believe that my broad life experience has given me the empathy and the skills to be a highly effective member of Congress for you. I'm a United States Army veteran. I've led a nonprofit organization. I've worked as a business executive. I've been a foster parent. I've raised 2 children and teenagers through the pandemic. I've worked as a grassroots community volunteer. I've translated political asylum cases, helping immigrants. I have fundraised for need-based preschool programs, scholarships, and public schools as well. I've worked for 7 years as a council member and a mayor in the city of Burlingame, sticking my neck out, doing hard things against political headwinds to get important policies moved forward and building unlikely coalitions. Some accomplishments I'm most proud of: leading the effort to pass an accelerated minimum wage, creating more housing in our community, helping protect 9 acres of open space on our Bayfront public land, and leading countywide investments in bike lanes and public transit, and a visionary countywide transportation equity program. In Congress, I'll draw upon my broad life experience as a grassroots volunteer and community leader to make progress on my top priorities: climate action, affordable housing and homelessness, education, mental health, and I'm talking a lot about fairness, equity, and civility. Really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you. Kevin?
Petra, was that to me?
Yes.
Petra, okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Thrive. Thank you, nonprofit partners. So grateful for the incredible work you do, especially during this pandemic when so many people are hurting, and for bringing equity always to the table. The slogan of my congressional campaign is fighting for our future, because I believe our democracy and our planet are in peril. And we have an economy that our children will inherit that only truly works for elites. We must have an economy that works for all. For the last 9 years, I've represented you in the Assembly. I wrote and passed more than 60 bills into law, including the first law of its kind for all vote by mail elections, and the first of its kind Disclose Act to ban dark money from California campaigns. I'm also proud to be the architect of a $3.7 billion climate resilience package, which is poised to bring hundreds of millions of dollars to the Bay for wetlands restoration and natural solutions to dealing with sea level rise. And there's an equity component built into that package. I also authored the law creating the San Mateo County Sea Level Rise Resiliency District. Now it's known as One Shoreline. So San Mateo County can lead on this existential challenge. I brought home over $1 billion to the peninsula to combat sea level rise and climate change, push for affordable housing, childcare, clean transportation, like Caltrain electrification. I've served as a mayor, a council member, small business owner in my district. My wife and twin boys live the day-to-day concerns of San Mateo County residents. I am deeply honored to be endorsed by outgoing Congresswoman Jackie Spear to succeed her. Congresswoman Anna Eshoo and Jared Huffman have joined our campaign. Former State Senator Jerry Hill. I'm proud to be the sole endorsed candidate of the California Democratic Party, as well as the California Labor Federation, and over 100 elected and community leaders who have endorsed me in this race. The peninsula is the epicenter of the affordability crisis, and I look forward to talking more about that issue in particular.
Thank you, Kevin. Ferenc? Sorry, you're on mute.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ferenc Pataki. Thank you so much for organizing this and allowing all of us or giving this opportunity. I immigrated legally to the United States in 1984, and I am a small business owner, a realtor, an accountant. I'm a father of 5 children. They were all born in our beautiful peninsula in Redwood City, California. We have a lot of wonderful memories there. And the reason I am running for Congress, because I truly believe that it is time to reform our monetary system that we inherited in 1913 when Congress created the Federal Reserve by the Federal Reserve Act on the 23rd of December. I believe that that was the biggest mistake. And I don't think we need to continue in those footsteps just because Congress made that humongous mistake. According to the United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5, it states it very clearly that the Congress shall have power to coin money. And that is exactly the main reason why I'm running, because there's nothing really we can do on a local level until we change the monetary system. So that's why I need to be in Washington. I need to be on the floor of the House, because I believe that I can persuade 434 politicians to pass a 3-page document, which is called Monetary Reform Act. And after that, we can solve many financial issues that we're facing.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Everybody can see the timer, right? Just want to make sure. Great. Okay, I will cut you off if I have to. I'm sorry to be the bad guy on that one. So thank you very much for your opening statements. We're going to go ahead and yes.
Petra, with all due
I'm
respect.
sorry. I think that I should not skip you. Okay. Sorry.
Don't worry about it, Petra. It's a busy time for all of us. Well, first of all, let me just thank Thrive for its leadership, the nonprofits. Thank you so much. Let me just say I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I'm running for Congress to fight for us in Washington, just as I've done here in San Mateo County. I was born and raised in San Mateo County, 4th generation, and the first person in my family to attend college. I've served as mayor of the city of Daly City and president of the Board of Supervisors, where I've led this county and through y'all through the COVID pandemic, protecting frontline workers and helping to achieve one of the highest vaccination rates in the country. As your congressman, I will make the wealthy and big corporations pay their fair share so we can invest in the middle class through more affordable healthcare and housing, free community college, tackling climate change, and protecting a woman's right to choose, and equal pay for equal work. I'm the only leading Democrat who refuses to take corporate PAC money. That's why I'm supported by frontline workers, including nurses, healthcare, and grocery store workers. I'm proud of the endorsements that I've received. Look forward to serving as your congressman, and want to thank you again, Petra, for this opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
And my apologies again. So thank you with everyone's for everyone's opening statements. Now we're going to go to our nonprofit partners, and they are going to be asking questions. So Jenny is up first.
All right. Thank you so much, Petra, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to all candidates joining us today, and thank you also to Thrive for the opportunity for us to serve as a co-host at today's candidate forum. My name is Jenny Bach here on behalf of the Filipino Bayanihan Resource Center, PBRC for short. Founded in 1989, PBRC is a nonprofit community-based organization serving the Filipino American population in Daly City and San Mateo County by providing direct services and community education. PBRC has ongoing projects serving to keep community members active and engaged, including pro bono legal immigration assistance, Escobo Daan Filipino martial arts classes, monthly legal clinics, and Tai Chi lessons. PBRC has and continues to host cultural events and food giveaways, as well as resource giveaways. And most importantly, our work provides direct outreach to community members to ensure that they receive updates from governmental entities. So our question for all candidates today is, in the past few years, there has been an increase in quote unquote sweeps on the immigrant communities by ICE. What would you do in office to help protect and defend immigrants in your community? And how would your office service them if they need language accessibility? Thank you.
Emily, you're first.
Thank you for the question. And Jenny, thank you for your work. This is a really important question. Let's start with the question about ICE. So, my heart is with the immigrant community. I've helped immigrants. I've worked on a border town translating political asylum cases. I think, in our community, we don't cooperate with ICE. I admire that the county has finally righted its policy to not cooperate with ICE. And that was a long time coming and should have happened a lot sooner than it did. But I think that we need to make sure that we protect our immigrants who are valued members of our community so that they don't live in fear. And in fact, in Burlingame, I've done some work creating the Burlingame Collaborative as mayor during the pandemic, where we actually helped undocumented folks access resources that they were afraid. There's so much fear right now to even access free, when they're food insecure, for free groceries. And we created some systems working with trusted community partners like your nonprofit and other faith organizations to make sure that immigrants who are feeling afraid could get the resources they need. So I think that's very important that we stand up, have a pathway to citizenship, and I hope we'll talk more about immigration, but I realize I'm short on time. As far as making sure language accessibility is critically important. It's important for voting and civic engagement. Tagalog is a huge language that's very important in our community. We'd make sure I'd have staff and translated resources and staff that can speak in native languages. I think that's a way to honor people. Thank you.
David?
Great, thank you so much. This is an important question. I want to talk a little bit about the work. My supervisorial district is probably one of the most diverse districts in the state of California, maybe the United States. I've had the opportunity to go with families to deportation hearings, really fighting for their rights, and obviously with their attorneys. There was a case in Daly City, if you recall, of a young man who was pulled over on a traffic stop. He wasn't the driver, he was the passenger. I was able to work with the city of Daly City, was able to work with the police department. He was detained, then sent to a detention center. Luckily, with those partners, those community advocates, we were able to get him back home. He's a student at San Francisco State. Those are the issues I care about. I think one of the things that I really look at, I think it's paramount, is for many, many years, I've called on the sheriff to make sure that we stop any deportation holdings at our county jail. And as many of you know, we had a truth form. I continue to advocate for that policy. And the sheriff actually, right now, as we speak and moving forward, has made it very clear, and make no mistake about it, that we're deporting no one from our jails. And so these are the issues that are critically important to me. These are the neighbors who live in my community. My wife, as many of you know, has been the Consul General of El Salvador for 12 years. We understand what happens when families are torn apart. And my goal is to make sure, whether you're Latino, whether you're Asian, whatever you are, ethnicity-wise,
Thank
and you're
you.
an immigrant, this has to be a welcoming place, and you have to be safe here.
Thank you. Ferenc?
Well, as an immigrant myself, I am all for legal immigration, and I believe that there's a due process for everything. When somebody's a refugee, a war refugee, obviously we need to welcome those people. But the issue is, just walking through the border, for example, into another country. I don't believe that is the right thing to do. Once we reform our monetary system, we will have plenty of funds to actually create opportunities all around the world in different countries. So we could actually prevent mass migration. We could create opportunities for people in their own homelands, so they don't have to leave their country for another country like the United States. And they could just come and visit as tourists once they have better opportunities. But if they wish to come to the United States, I believe there's a legal channel that they could file for asylum in the first safe haven on our southern border, for example, in Mexico. In our northern border, we're talking about Canada. And then once they're fully vetted, I'm all for it, of course, then we should allow them to come in.
Thank you. Gus?
Thank you, Petra. My father was an immigrant to this country, so I'm a firm believer that immigration has always been and will continue to be a key part of the American story. On the issue of ICE, I think it's a little dangerous to ask law enforcement agencies to not cooperate with each other. I think the problem that policy is trying to solve is actually solvable through comprehensive immigration reform. And that involves kind of three levers. First is making sure that the border is controlled. So anyone who does come across the border is coming through controlled entry points. Second, we're gonna have to make a serious investment in our immigration court system. Right now, if you apply for asylum, it's backed up by years, and that's not fair to anyone involved in the process. And third is a pathway to citizenship for people who are already here. There's roughly 11 million of them. And I'm open to a conversation about that. It needs to involve some form of restitution for being outside of the process. My father followed every step America asked him to follow. And I think the vast majority of immigrants, in fact, do that. But I'm open to, again, creative ideas for how to make that happen. So for instance, maybe it's community service that's tied to how long you were here outside the process. That's something that could put more hands on deck for organizations like yours. And I think if we have a creative solution like that involves kind of respect for the border, respect for the legal process, that creates the possibility of a bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform, which the practical reality is the only way you're getting immigration reform really is with both parties on board. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kevin?
Thank you, Petra. Certainly agree with Gus's last point. I'll circle back to that, but thank you, Jenny, for the question. It's wonderful to see you proud of the relationships I've established in the Filipino community. This congressional district, over 30% API with a significant Filipino population. My district staff will most certainly reflect the diversity that is present in the 15th congressional district. So in terms of ICE, we clearly need reforms of the ICE system, a mission, a cultural and mission change with ICE. I'm pleased that the sheriff's office is not cooperating on deportations. San Mateo County was a little late to the game on that issue. I'm pleased that has changed. I'm proud to have supported Senate Bill 54 to ensure state agencies do not cooperate with ICE as was currently configured. we most certainly need comprehensive immigration reform. And I do concur that there should be at least a bipartisan interest to make that happen. Absolutely a path to citizenship, DACA, the Dreamers. This policy is crying out for a politics of the common good, a humane immigration policy that meets humane goals, but also practical economic goals and human rights goals. There is a policy path forward here, and I would support that in Washington.
Thank you. On to our next question.
Yes, good afternoon, candidates, and thank you for Thrive for letting Center for Independence be a co-host to this forum today. My name is Ben Mcmullen. I am the Systems Change Advocate at Center for Independence of Individuals with Disabilities, where it is our mission to provide support services, community awareness, and systems change advocacy to promote the full and equal integration of people with disabilities into the county. One of the many services we provide and we advocate for is home and community-based services. I would like each candidate to reflect on how they have supported home and community-based services in the past and what principles they would carry to DC to implement to support home and community-based services. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Kevin?
Ben, wonderful to see you. I have a history working with the disability community. When I was an aide to Jackie Spear, I was a liaison to the San Mateo County Commission on Disabilities and Craig McCullough, and saw up close the wonderful work being done in our county. So most certainly I have supported funding opportunities, particularly through our state budget process. As Speaker Pro Tem of the Assembly and a member of the Budget Committee, I was a strong advocate for increased funding at the state level for those with intellectual and developmental disabilities, the IDD funding, a significant increase last year. We're going to be advocating for more of that this year. You know, I wear hearing aids. I've always been sensitive on that issue. I've actually carried a couple of hearing aid bills, consumer oriented, and I do think hearing aids should be covered by insurance. They're not cosmetic. So just one personal issue there, but you will have a strong advocate for the disability community. Proud of the relationships with CID and the commission, and you know, you will have an advocate for ADA, which is landmark federal legislation, but continues to need to be monitored and updated as needed. So you will most certainly have an ear, and you will have my voice on your behalf in Washington.
Thank you, Kevin. Ferenc?
Yes, I just unmuted myself. Well, once we control our money supply and issue our own money after passing the Monetary Reform Act, I believe we will have the funds to do a lot of good, even helping the disabled community. For example, even today, you know, in San Mateo County, there are many businesses that disabled members of the disabled community cannot visit because they are not new businesses and they are not required even for a handicap accessible bathroom, just the basic things. So I will definitely be advocating that small businesses, I know it is a financial hardship on many of them and sometimes physically impossible, but small businesses should receive grant from the federal government so they could create handicap accessibility, and not just for the new businesses, because according to the building code, when somebody opens a new business, they have to do a tenant improvement and they must have ADA bathrooms. But I believe old businesses, existing businesses should have that as well.
Thank you. Gus.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Ben, for your question. My personal experience with disabilities as an issue comes primarily through Down syndrome. My cousin growing up, I was very close to, had Downs, and the siblings of a couple of my close friends growing up also had Downs. When I think about disabilities from a policy perspective, I think about it from three lenses. One is accessibility, as I actually agree with Ferenc on the idea of, I think where Congress can step up a little bit is making it possible through some kind of funding for businesses to become more compliant with ADA. The vast majority of businesses want their businesses to be accessible to everyone. We just need to make that a little easier for folks to do. And I do think sometimes ADA does get hijacked cynically to sort of prey on business owners, and we need to figure out how to kind of get rid of that. I think the second lens is employment. The way I think you help quality of life for folks with disabilities is getting them better opportunities in the workforce. And I think that's a place where you could use the soft power of a congressional seat to get out there in the community and sort of build awareness within companies around here about opportunities that they might have to create positions or offer positions to folks with disabilities. And then I think the kind of the third lens is culture. And as folks with disabilities, if we get them more employed and more spread out in our community here, they become more visible. And as they become more visible, there's much less of the sort of cultural stigma that we've had in the past. So I think it's accessibility, employment, and sort of the cultural shift. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, I think housing is a really a key component. And what we're trying to do as a county around the big wave, it's a transformative project. We actually worked with Big Wave on a land swap, but really giving people a place and a space in our disability community, not only to have a home and to have wraparound services, but most importantly is the economic component to that. And so job training, working with the various partners that are out there in the employer sector. My sister, for the last 14 years, has worked at the Jefferson Union High School District, and she deals with people on the spectrum. But mostly, what it is, it's adults who are transitioning, but really making sure that we give them the appropriate skills to move forward. And I think what's important from a policy perspective is to realize that they're just like you and I, and sometimes that gets lost. And as policymakers, we need to reinforce it. What I hear as I travel around the Congressional District and years before is how poorly the state funds IHSS and providing services, whether it's caregiver services. The state of California does not fund at a level that makes it easy for people to work and for people who really need the care to get the care. So one of the things that I would do is on a federal level is really try to figure out.
All right, time, David.
Thank you.
Emily?
Thank you for the question, Benjamin. The realm of the federal government is certainly equity and civil rights, and that's where the federal government can do a lot. You asked us, what have we done in our current positions? At the local level, I think we have a particular sensitivity in my community to this issue because we're dealing with housing up close and personal as city council members and mayors. And we also have a wonderful organization of Ability Path in our community. So I've had lots of conversations with them as well, and understanding the needs of the disabled community. We do need more housing. We need affordable housing for everyone, but we also, one of the last major discussions we had in Burlingame, we had a lot of support among our city council to do some preferences and do some projects that actually are focused on folks that with disabilities, because we need to make sure people can live independent, fulfilling lives that may have different disabilities. So I think we're going to make some progress on that. And I've had independent one-on-one conversations with this organization to even talk about how we could use some of our local affordable housing funds to help partner on affordable housing projects. And we're probably maybe exploring opportunities like that in the future, because we also need to make sure that the housing, it's not just affordable housing, it also has those additional wraparound services. It has case managers to really help folks with disabilities. I have a lot of passion behind education. I'm putting education as a priority in my campaign, but it's also related to kids with differences, learning differences, special needs, and that is the realm of the federal government. We've never fully funded it in the public school system, and we need to do a better job. Hope we'll talk more about that.
Hi, thank you, Ben, for your question. Chantel, thank you for joining us.
A pleasure. Hi, my name is Chantel Watkins from Belhaven Action in Menlo Park. We worked together in Belhaven neighborhood to get the job done. During COVID, we ran PCR testing sites, worked at neighborhood vaccine clinics, and did a lot of outreach to spread the word. I'm a student at Canepa College. I'm double majoring art design and fashion design custom dressmaking. My commute to school on the bus is 2 hours, and the Canepa shuttle takes me an hour. On my street, there are 2 schools. I've seen a lot of hit and runs because some cars drive fast. Here's our question for Belhaven Action. In the Belhaven community of Menlo Park, we have issues with economic development and displacement. Our neighborhood has changed, and we are still experiencing negative impacts of COVID-19 today. Because of racist practices that began at the federal level and have remained part of housing policy for decades, we are a community of concern that the city, county, state does not invest in. We have the financial resources and we choose not to spend it where it is needed the most. Redlining, predatory lending, discriminatory lending creates areas in our district where people live without access, easy access to dependable transportation, medical services, affordable groceries, pharmacy, reasonable housing options, banking, and jobs that pay a living wage. Income inequality and discriminatory practices still exist in the state, county, and local levels. What can you do to address the barriers for working families?
Thank you, Chantel. Ferenc?
It's my turn.
Yes.
Well, again, I think I have to keep coming back to the monetary reform because that is, I think my whole campaign is riding on that because that is the most important issue. Once our government controls the money supply and issues our money, then none of these that you mentioned, Chantel, will be issues because we're going to be able to help local communities. Let's say transportation. You shouldn't have to travel 2 hours. Even if it's back and forth, that's way too much. I believe a lot more buses should be on the ground so people can get from point A to point B preferably within 15, 20 minutes or half an hour the most. And there are many issues. For example, accidents could happen when people are driving fast. Well, I live in East Palo Alto, and I have to tell you, even though that I live in a residential neighborhood, right by a stop sign, people just drive through. It's almost like no police on the ground. I believe if we fund our police, well-trained police, and hire more, not less, but hire more.
Thank you.
Then we should actually solve these issues as well.
Thank you, Gus.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Chantel, for your question. I grew up in inner city St. Louis in a heavily minority, low-income neighborhood. St. Louis is one of the most segregated cities in America. And I've thought long and hard about these issues. I think the answer really has to be centered around entrepreneurship. That's a big part of my story. And entrepreneurship solves 2 different problems. It solves a present day problem of how you build wealth in areas like Belhaven, but it also solves a future problem. I went to a talk by Reverend Owens over at the San Mateo NAACP, and she talked a lot about the issue of building intergenerational wealth in minority communities. And I think entrepreneurship offers a path to doing that, to building that intergenerational wealth, because business is an asset you can hand down. So I think what we have to do is think about how do we foster entrepreneurship in areas like Belhaven. Obviously, you have Facebook right next door. Facebook has created an enormous amount of wealth, an enormous number of people who have money that they can invest. So I think this is an area where particularly this district has a unique opportunity in the amount of business knowledge that is in it and the amount of available capital for investing that's in it. And using the Office of Congress, I think, is a way to, you could use the visibility to bring people together to say, listen, let's create some programs where, where we're training people how to write business plans. Like, think about what kind of business you could start there in Belhaven. Let's teach you how to write a business plan, and then let's put you in front of folks who have the capital to invest. That's how we build wealth, both in the present and intergenerationally in communities like Belhaven. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily.
Thank you for the question. Well, we've got to invest in create more housing, create more affordable housing, create pathways to home ownership, because that's how we build wealth in this country. We have to invest in transportation solutions that are affordable and effective so that you're not riding 2 hours on a bus, that you have a choice, or that people can make a choice that makes economic sense. It gives most people pause when they could ride a bus for $2 versus riding Caltrain for 30 minutes for $16.50, round trip. Those are different kinds of decisions. We need to make transportation more affordable and more equitable, and we have to have better bus routes that get to different places. I'm proud of the work I've done in this county for a visionary transportation equity program using revenues from express lanes on the highways to provide Clipper Start cards, $200 that will be replenished for folks who are income qualified to actually make a transportation benefit more accessible and useful. So we need to do more programs like that, but we've got to invest in the transportation infrastructure too. And that's where the federal government can help so much. We've got to have health equity. You mentioned these outcomes too. And in communities that have been traditionally disadvantaged, we have to have climate justice. We have to protect against sea level rise and make sure that the air we're breathing is healthy. And we are prioritizing federal assets to the communities that need the most help. And that's would be a core value that I would bring as your next Congresswoman.
Thank you. Kevin?
Thank you so much for the question. I want to make sure when I'm a Congress member representing this area, I have a district staff that properly services the entire district, including the areas with real need. Like Belhaven. Equity must be baked in to all of our policies. When I was the mayor of South San Francisco, social equity was a central plank. I called for looking at our entire funding picture and making sure that resources were going to neighborhoods that didn't always get the attention that they deserved. We have to have equity in all of our funding formulas. One of those challenges is because this is a so-called wealthy county, we are left out of funding in some cases from the federal government because of some of the wealth being generated in areas. But as we know, there are pockets of real need in neighborhoods. So disadvantaged communities is a definition that's used. I've worked to include an additional definition called under-resourced communities, which better accounts for the cost of living in an area. We have an affordability crisis forcing people out. Real challenges on housing and transportation, as you cite. So much work to be done there. But what I would say is the federal government has a critical role in providing funding, but I'm not for top-down decision-making. I think the actual decisions on how the dollars get dispersed locally should be made by local decision makers and advocates and stakeholders.
Thank you.
Like the organization. Thank you.
David?
Yeah, I think housing is critical. I just don't think that this economy now is working for all of us. But one of the things I'm especially proud of being on the Board of Supervisors is the acquisition of 5 hotels. And last week, we had the ability to cut the ribbon on a navigation center to get people who really need help to this navigation center in Redwood City, really trying to solve by 2023, getting to functional zero when it comes to homelessness. I had the ability, I've walked every city, but I've talked with someone, a young man, he was about 18 and 19 years old, in East Palo Alto, and he dropped out of community college. The reason he dropped out of community college is hard to believe, but it was a car reason. He just didn't have the money. It was $1,100, couldn't afford it, and he had to go all the way from East Palo Alto to Canepa College. We need to make sure that community college is free, and we need to make sure when it comes to East Palo Alto and it comes to these cities, in Daly City, we're able to do it with Skyline College and get a bus up to Skyline from the Daly City BART. We really need to help those who need us the most. The one thing that really pains me is that the friends I grew up with, the people I grew up with, they're no longer here because they can't afford the rent and they can't afford the mortgage. The county of San Mateo, over many, many years with Measure K funds,
Thank you, David.
about $100 million in housing. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yep.
So we are now at our mental stretch break. So we've been talking about very serious things and we've had some nice long answers and we appreciate that. And now we get to have some quick questions. So the first one is, so District 15 is new and it includes parts of San Francisco County and parts of San Mateo and not other parts of San Mateo. What makes this district special? 25 seconds, and first is Emily.
The diversity. It's amazing. I've had an opportunity to live. My first apartment in San Francisco when my husband and I were first married was a 1-bedroom apartment on the corner of Mission and Geneva, right near Balboa BART station. I know the 15th Congressional District. We lived there for 3 years and then we moved just near the Alamany Flea Market, really close to the line of the Congressional District, and living on the Peninsula. It's different. The people are amazing, the diversity, the inclusivity, and the collaboration.
Sorry, we're doing these super quick. Okay, Ferenc.
Well, I totally agree. Diversity is definitely something that we all enjoy. You can think of any kind of food that you want to eat, and you could just be there with a car. If you have a car, you could be there in about 10-15 minutes. There are some magical places like the Coyote Point. It is so beautiful. I remember like 30 years ago, the first time I was swimming.
David,
there,
sorry, we're doing a very quick 25 seconds. David, you're up. Hey, wait, but you're on mute, so we won't start yet.
I would just say it's people's story. There's so much, whether you're in East Palo Alto, Redwood City, and in San Francisco, there's so much that unites us. And the stories that I hear are stories of hope. And the people of this district inspire me. And I'm just glad to be running and glad to be a part of this process.
Thank you. Kevin.
Well, most certainly the diversity of the people of this district. This may not be a fun answer, but it is a Bayside district. This district hugs the bay in the inundation zone for bay level rise. So this will be quite literally the front line of this conversation around climate and how we deal with it. And it makes it very unique to have the entire district really nestled up against the bay.
Thank you. And Gus.
Well, I'll tell you, for someone who grew up in the Midwest, living here is like living in the promised land. My wife and I got married in the harbor in Half Moon Bay, and we love it here. And I'm not leaving here unless somebody wheels me out on a gurney. I love everything about this district. As people have said, there's every kind of restaurant you could possibly imagine. I love being able to walk down the street and hear different languages. I think that's great. And I love the people here. So it's an amazing place to live.
Great. Okay, rapid question number 2. If you had a magic wand and could get one bill straight to the president's desk, what would it be? Kevin, you're first.
Is this a rapid fire? Okay, we'll be quick about this. The For the People Act, HR 1, which is held up in the Senate, it would put into place many of the reforms that we have already in California with regard to voting access and protecting our democracy, creating federal oversight and federal protections for our democracy, which I believe is under attack. If I could make that bill happen, it would send a message that we are there to protect democracy.
Thank you. David.
Medicare for all. Regardless of what your checkbook is, everyone should have equal access to healthcare. This is, to me, one of the most important issues not now, but in the race, but to give people the opportunity to have health care. And I've experienced a community under stress when they did not receive health care because Seton Hospital was on close, was going to close. So health care, Medicare for all.
Well, again, I have to get back to the Monetary Reform Act. And I don't need a magical wand to present the Monetary Reform Act to Congress. So please send me to Congress, guys. It's only 3 pages, not 10,000 pages. And then all of your dreams will come true once we control our money supply and issue our own money.
Yes.
Well, like David, I want to talk about universal health care, but I want to talk about it from a conservative perspective, which is universal health savings accounts. I think it's such a huge opportunity to show that using conservative principles of less spending, more personal choice and freedom, and more limited administrative state, you can actually achieve a lot of the things that are conventionally understood to be liberal goals, including something like universal health care. I think that's the sort of flagship issue to prove that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily?
2 answers: build back better because of the investment of early learning and childcare investment, huge important things, and climate action, missed opportunity. But also we don't worry about our voting rights so much here in this region because they're so protected, but the John Lewis Voting Rights Act has to be passed on a national level because it's threatened around this country and it's an existential problem. So between those 2, thank you.
Okay. Thank you guys for playing this game. We have 2 more. What's your favorite thing to do on weekends? And we'll start with Gus.
Thank you. I love to take my dog Dixie for runs up in the hills, the coastal hills, because you can. It wears me out. It doesn't really wear her out because she's a border collie, but it wears me out, and you can see the ocean and the harbor, and it's just a nice place to just relax and unplug from juggling a campaign and running a business. Thank you.
Kevin?
Well, I guess I should say walking precincts, but if I absolutely honest here in terms of mental health and physical health, I play basketball, get cardio workout early Sunday mornings, and that is how I break a sweat and stay sort of in shape. And that is my one little indulgence on the weekend. And of course, spending time with my wife and boys at home.
Emily? Oh, thanks.
I started online Tai Chi classes about 2 years ago when I was mayor during the pandemic. It has been amazing for me. It is a huge commitment, a weekly commitment, and I practice regularly. And I also have to get into nature. That's what soothes me therapeutically, whether it's going into Hutter Park for a hike, bicycle Sundays, or going to the coast and seeing that beautiful ocean. That's what I love, to get into nature and get back into touch with myself. Thank you.
David?
I love spending time with my wife and Piero. So on Sundays, we always, after we're done walking precincts, just really spending time and going to a park. And a person who I went to high school with, he has a son the same age, just hanging out, talking, doing that sort of thing, and just seeing my son grow. He's now 4 years old. And to me, that's been the best experience of my life. And, I love my son, Piero. Thank you.
Ferenc?
I love taking my kids to Redmorton Park in Redwood City. That's our all-time favorite park. We have many great memories there, playing tennis, playing soccer, and the kids love the swings, the slides, and all those things. I'm a family man. It seems like that I've been a father all my life. So,
Thank you.
That's what I do.
Great. So this last one, we're not even going to use a timer for because it's a yes/no question. If you become our representative to Washington, would you be interested in meeting with Thrive and nonprofits twice a year to hear what's going on locally? And the first person who gets to answer, remember, it's just a yes/no question, is David.
Yes. How about that?
Emily.
Yes.
Ferenc.
Yes.
Kevin.
Yes, of course.
And Gus.
Yes, minimally.
Okay, it was a softball, but We are now going to go back into the more difficult questions. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Evan Adams.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Petra, for putting this on and inviting Peninsula for Everyone. I'm Evan Adams. I'm a volunteer with Peninsula for Everyone, and I'm from Foster City. At Peninsula for Everyone, we advocate at the intersection of the housing crisis where economic inequality, poverty, historic segregation, federal home financing, and climate change all intersect. By all accounts, our local San Mateo and Bay Area housing crisis has expanded across the country. Nationwide, lack of supply, lack of community-based funding, increasing interstate migration, and an increase in people experiencing homelessness are permeating society. From your seat in Washington, D.C., at a federal level, how will you address the national housing crisis? And secondly, what does a congressperson need to do to help address our local housing crises in the Bay Area and in California?
David?
Yeah, I think that's a phenomenal question. I think what the federal government needs to do is we need to follow the lead of Senator Padilla when it comes to housing. I know he's talked about a Marshall Plan of really seeing what we can do to create housing to the tune of 6,500% and really identifying the dollars. One of the things I'm working on a county level is really identifying what surplus property that we have and identifying that property and seeing what we can do to get into a partnership. I think what we've done around the Navigation Center is extremely, extremely important. Really identifying a site, working in partnership with the city of Redwood City, and finding housing that works for everyone. I'm very proud that in Colma, we set up what's the Veterans Village, really housing our veterans in partnership with the city of Colma and the county of San Mateo, putting millions and millions of dollars in. But that's the sort of housing that we need, housing for everyone. And that's going to require a financial commitment from the federal government. And that needs to be prioritized.
Kevin?
Evan, thank you for the question. The federal government most certainly has a role to play here, as do local and state partners. And there's tension between local and state when it comes to land use policy. Certainly in recent years, the state pushing hard on this issue, SB 9, SB 10, other measures to ensure that we are building housing. We are nowhere near where we need to be, especially on the affordable side. And that's where the federal government comes in, properly funding the low-income housing tax credit. David mentioned the Padilla bill. The key components of that bill, and I would want to be a House author of a companion bill, $45 billion to the Federal Housing Trust Fund, creating a dedicated revenue stream for permanent supportive housing, a comprehensive kind of approach. We on the state level, you know, when I was on the council and mayor of South San Francisco, we had redevelopment agencies, the single greatest source of funding for affordable housing. That went away before I got to Sacramento. I think we are still feeling the effects of that unfortunate decision. We have attempted to give local governments additional tools. I authored a bill on affordable housing authorities. I've authored legislation to prioritize the preservation of affordable units for housing and community development funding. But this challenge, this affordability crisis where housing is at the center, requires all of the above approach at all levels of government to get us where we need to be to address this crucial issue.
Thank you, Kevin. Ferenc?
Well, as a realtor, over the years, I've seen the quality of life going down dramatically in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, especially. Once again, I have to get back to the Monetary Reform Act. We must reform our monetary system so the federal government will have enough funds to actually help each and every state wherever help is needed to build more affordable housing, because I have to say that it's just not enough. All these beautiful buildings going up on the peninsula, what I see is the majority of them are luxurious apartment buildings, Well, the sad reality is that the majority of the people are making a little bit above minimum wage. There's no way that they can afford these beautiful apartments. And I think this is definitely something that the federal government can help with to create a lot more affordable housing, or at least a lot more percentage within a building, not just a small percentage of affordability.
Thank you, Gus.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Evan, for the question. I actually want to start at the local level. I think the local strategy has a lot to do with infill development. We have a lot of capacity along arteries like El Camino to add significantly to our housing stock. And if we designate a fraction of it to be affordable, that creates creates a big increase in our affordable housing stock, while also keeping it relatively uniformly spread in the community, as opposed to concentrating it in areas like the area that I grew up in. I think you have to do the hard work to sell those projects in the community so that you have community support for them. I think the SB 9, SB 10 strategy is not great because it tramples all over local people's preferences for how they want their communities to be. I think at the federal level, it has a lot to do with an easy thing you can do, well, not easy thing, but a straightforward thing to try would be to reform HUD. I had a great conversation with Kate Comfort over at HIP, who said they walked away from a bunch of HUD funding because dealing with HUD as an agency was such a pain in the butt that it wasn't even worth it. And my wife, who actually served for almost a year as executive director of CORE, which is a Thrive member, when I could hear her cursing from her office downstairs, like I knew she's on the HUD website, like it's clockwork. So I think reforming something like that so that agencies that are in this issue can get access to the funding that's already there, but in a way that doesn't make you want to walk away from it. So that's what I would do at the federal level, and I think infill development at the local level is how we get there.
Thank you. Emily?
Thank you for the question, Evan. And, I have put forth in my priorities, housing and homelessness is right up there in my top priorities. So this is an issue that I've worked with and helped really, I'm proud of my track record on the local level of actually creating more housing and knowing where the rubber meets the road at the local level, how it's done successfully. In Burlingame, our city council unanimously approved a general plan, took us 3.5 years, community-driven process, to imagine 23% population growth in our community. That puts that in perspective, that's the equivalent in our city of San Francisco creating another 86,000 units of housing, or San Jose creating 100,000 units of housing. So the proportion is huge. 3,500 units of housing, 23% population growth, nearly 7,000 more people coming to our community. And it's working. We have nearly, I think we're going to get a report on Saturday showing 2,000 units entitled and in the pipeline. So it's working at all levels of affordability. So those policies are working. Where we struggle at the local level, particularly in expensive parts of the world like the Bay Area, is we need to make deeper levels of affordability. And that's where the federal government can help us with those tax credits to streamline, as Gus mentioned, to make it easier to get money in the hands of the nonprofit developers, to have resources, to have preservation of naturally existing affordable housing so that everything isn't just repurposed and redeveloped with brand new units. We've got to create more affordability. We have to have Section 8 vouchers. And I'm also prioritizing mental health because that's part of the homelessness issue when it comes to addiction, and mental health issues too when it comes to homelessness. Hope we talk more about that.
Thank you, Evan. Lisa, go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Teeler. I'm Executive Director of the Bay Area Community Health Advisory Council, pronoun she, her. I want to thank Thrive for this opportunity, also our co-hosts, and as well as all the candidates, as well as Miguel and Luis, who are providing the interpretation in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking community. BACHAC, also known as Bay Area Community Health Advisory Council, is really focused on minimizing health disparities in diverse communities across generations in San Mateo County. We've been doing that for 26 plus years. And we've done that through connection to services, providing resources, doing health education, and doing advocacy work. And so the reason why we're here is that we've seen, especially during the pandemic, how government systems and leaders can really have an impact on the health of communities, particularly underserved communities. And as a result, our questions really focus on access to tools and resources and services that have an enormous impact on communities of color and other marginalized communities. So my question to you is, how would you leverage your position on health equity to serve the needs of our diverse and often underserved communities, access to services, et cetera? An example is, we're in the hub of the tech innovation. And however, large segments of our population do not have stable internet, access to computer equipment, or computer literacy, predominantly in communities of color. And this was emphasized during the pandemic when access to testing and vaccines initially required communities to access information online. So how would you address that? Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks so much. So I've actually been writing since day one on a universal healthcare strategy, because right now in this country, after a dozen years and hundreds of billions of dollars and all the drama, the Affordable Care Act got us from 80% to 90%. And the 10% in this country who do not have health coverage are primarily lower income minority folks. So universal healthcare strategy would go a long way toward addressing some of the equity issues in the healthcare system. I actually thought you made a very interesting point about access to internet, which I wasn't expecting to talk about today, but I'm very interested in again, because I'm so interested in entrepreneurship and so much of that is tech related. I'm really interested in how we bring internet access both to underserved communities in urban areas, but also in rural areas. I think rural broadband is a real lever that we can pull. But I'm very interested in this issue, and like I said, I've been running on healthcare from day one, and I offer the ability to bring the Republican Party along. I'm the endorsed candidate by San Mateo GOP, San Francisco GOP, the California State GOP, running on the idea of a conservative universal healthcare plan. So I'm really interested in this issue, and I think that I can, in fact, persuade my fellow Republicans to get on board a strategy like that, which would do enormous amount of good for underserved communities. Thank you.
Emily?
Thank you. Appreciate. Well, what the nonprofit and the community-based organizations do so well, and Thrive has been such an amazing creator of this ecosystem of people, great people and great organizations talking to one another, getting to know each other on a personal level and understanding what resources are needed where, so that we can use all the superpowers of the private sector, the public sector, government, and nonprofits to help people. And so I think keeping those community coalitions alive and understanding what the needs are, so we direct those resources in the most equitable way, will be a huge thing. And the private sector, I think, is going to be a key, as you mentioned, to actually creating a more sustainable world into the future. So how can we leverage their talent, their resources to build those relationships, understand what we need, help us pay for some of that infrastructure? Where are the community benefits coming in to make sure we don't have a digital divide, to make sure we have reliable internet for all our kids, so that students aren't sitting in the Starbucks parking lot writing a term paper on a phone instead of having the proper resources. So we need to make sure that we're targeting the resources effectively, that we're investing in the proper infrastructure, and that infrastructure is expensive, and that's where the federal government can help. But understanding what are the key community needs, and that's where relationships and building bridges with partners in the nonprofit sector can help government actually allocate the resources at the local level in the most appropriate way.
David?
Yeah, what we found out in the pandemic is that these disparities you talked about, they've always been there, and they've been exacerbated. I'm proud as a county with our COVID relief funds. The COVID relief funds is around $300 million, addressing issues such as rental assistance and housing support, food support for those who are insecure, individual and families, immigrant assistance, what we've done around small businesses, childcare and learning hubs, very, very important. You talked about technology. The county has appropriated $6.4 million in access to public Wi-Fi, and nonprofit grants exceed over $5 million. But one of the things that we realized through the pandemic is that through all these programs, it's an ability to continue to move these programs forward. Just because the pandemic may be on the tail end, we don't know for sure, these programs should continue to be funded. And so we talk about the food insecure. There should be a pathway to make sure that we provide those dollars. And I think the total amount that we've given as a county, it's an astronomical number. It's about $300 million. Can you imagine that? Amazing. And so we need to stay acutely focused on making sure that we get those dollars. And let me close with this, Petra. Not everyone got stimulus checks, but we created an immigrant fund. And my good friend, John Sobrato, we gave $16 million to immigrants who wouldn't have got it. Thank you, Petra.
Thank you so much for the question. There's no doubt here that the pandemic shone a light on the inequities in our healthcare system nationally and locally. The county's response was admirable in many ways, fell short in a few other select ways, but I am proud of the work done by San Mateo Strong, Roseanne Faust, and others supporting the small business community, a tremendous convening of community stakeholders to help. So what I would say is, this San Francisco Peninsula, for all of our economic successes, which are tremendous when you look at the economic output and innovation economy that we call home here, we are unfortunately a poster child for income inequality. We can't escape that. We have a shrinking middle class, we have an affordability crisis, and people are hurting. People are still trying to recover, even with the low unemployment rate we have, 2.3, which is incredible in and of itself. But people are still finding their way through this. I would say big picture, Medicare for all. I certainly support that policy, universal health care with a transition for not-for-profit entities like Kaiser. Profits should not be a part of healthcare. I think there would have to be a transitional period to that Medicare for all system that I support. What I'm most proud of in the short term, this state budget, we are going to be having universal access to healthcare in the state of California for everyone, regardless of immigration status. That's going to be a landmark budget bill. I'm proud to support it. I'll be voting for that this spring.
Ferenc?
Well, again, I need to get back to the Monetary Reform Act. We must reform our monetary system so we could help all of these issues on a federal level. And then we're going to be able to have free education. That is my ardent dream of destiny. Free education, free healthcare, and basic things like internet. I think we all found that that our internet is way too slow. When our children were studying here at home during the middle of the pandemic, all of the parents had to scramble and pay a little extra for the local cable companies to have a little faster internet, so our kids can actually be on a Zoom call like we are right now. Personally, I believe that each and every home in every community should have the highest technology, which is right now, as we know it, or please correct me if I'm wrong, fiber optics. Fiber optics is very fast. Then 2 or 3 or 4 kids can be on a Zoom call if it has to be, again, in the future. We don't know the future if we're going to have another pandemic. But in the 21st century, we cannot afford to have slow internet in any home. And with federal funding, we should be able to solve many of these issues.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. For the next round, we're going to have 60-second answers instead of 90-second answers.
Petra?
Yes?
Do I not get to ask my question?
You get to ask your questions. I'm just letting the panelists, the candidates know the answers will be shorter. Go ahead.
Okay. So my name's Diane Leeds, and thank you all for being here today. I'm with San Francisco Peninsula People Power, which is a grassroots nonpartisan organization of volunteers that was founded in March of 2017 in response to a call from the ACLU to strengthen our local communities by affirming American values of respect and equity. We focused first on immigration rights, especially as related to ICE deportations, and then in 2018 started voter education and outreach activities targeting communities which have historically been underrepresented in San Mateo County. So even though we have a very high voter turnout rate, there's pockets within the county where turnout is quite low. So my question is, San Mateo County has enjoyed expanded voting options since the Voters' Choice Act was implemented in 2018. However, this may all be for nothing if states continue to pass restrictions on voting rights. So first, how would you leverage San Mateo County's experience with mailing ballots to all voters, expanding days to vote and ways to vote to more effectively push forward voting rights legislation at the national level? And more importantly, what different approach would you take to get past a stalemate in the Senate to ensure the passage of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act so that all voters in the United States can enjoy the same broad access to voting that we have here in California?
Thank you. Ferenc?
Well, that's a very interesting and complex question. But I think as long as someone is a United States citizen, they shouldn't have any problem voting in any state. I know there are a lot of issues regarding IDs or ID laws. In many places in the world, I think that is a basic requirement. You know, that one should have an ID. I know there are a lot of people against the mail-in ballots because they think that there will be a lot of frauds. There are solutions for that too. If someone wants to get a driver's license, they have to go to the DMV. They have to be fingerprinted. Your right fingerprint is on there. I think we could make the mail-in ballots bulletproof as well, to have a spot, for the right thumbprint.
Thank you.
To
David?
avoid any issues.
Look, I think here in San Mateo County, and I think I think Mark Church is spot on, right? I think here in the county, which could be a model for the nation, we know how to get elections done. We know how to make sure that it's accessible, providing voting centers, making sure that the ballots are there. Extremely, extremely important. And on the Board of Supervisors, we've been able to allocate funding that allows Mark Church to do such. And he's come to us on occasions for additional funding, whether it's voting outreach into communities of interest. I think at the federal level, what we need to do is to work in concert. We need to debunk the false claims about the John Lewis Voting Rights Act that exists out there. And it's mostly the Republican Party that is stalling the act. And we need to make sure that they understand it's in their best interest as in our best
Thank
interest
you.
to make sure that people have access to voting. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Diane, for your question. I believe voting should be both easy to do and hard to cheat. So I think if we focus on the initiatives that can kind of hit both those notes, it will be possible to bring the Republican Party, my party, along on that issue. So for instance, anything that keeps politicians out of things related to drawing district lines. I'm all for nonpartisan redistricting commissions in every state. Things that keep politicians out of vote counting and vote certification. I'm all on board with that. Politicians should wait to see what the results are. Voters decide that, but I don't want any mixing in those issues. I think I personally think that vote by mail benefits my party as well. That's a little bit of an uphill discussion in my party, but I'm working on it, and I'm happy to continue to work on it. So I think if we focus on, on some of those issues that we can find agreement on, we can make something happen. Thank you.
Emily?
Thank you for that. I mean, I agree. San Mateo County has been a model in large part to great policy making, but also to community organizations like yours, Diane, and others that helped us make sure that the community was engaged and educated how to vote as we transition from precincts to voting centers, make sure people with disabilities had access and language accessibility, big education effort. So kudos and hats off. Look, we need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the For the People Act. That has to happen. But to your question, what are we need to hold up and leverage? Yes, everything we've done successfully in San Mateo County, but we also need to build the relationships on the other side to get that done. And I think that's something different that I bring as a candidate, because I bring such broad experience. I have share the Bay Area values of what we stand for as far as fair and free elections. But as an Army veteran, as a person who's worked in the private sector, business executive, as a person who's worked in local government, I have some credibility with folks maybe on the other side where we don't agree on other hot button issues, but I can relate to them and help them understand that we have to get this done for the sake of our democracy that I fought for in uniform as a veteran. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Diane, for your question. That brings us to our closing statements. Oh, did I forget you, Kevin?
Yeah.
I did. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question.
I'm just trying to be fair.
No worries. I didn't want to miss an opportunity to answer this because I did write the law that created the model right here in San Mateo County. In a municipal election, we were able to prove the model that youth turnout went up, API turnout went up, Latino turnout went up, African-American turnout went up. That led to the Voters' Choice Act, and now we have universal vote by mail. Never been easier to vote than ever before. I'm proud to have been a leader in making that happen. And California will absolutely not retreat on this. The question is the red states where you have examples of voter purges, 2 million people removed from the voter rolls, complex forms of voter ID, erecting barriers. That is precisely why we need federal protections like the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, like the For the People Act. We need federal protections to ensure we have free and fair elections across the land, and we're once again a model democracy in the world.
Thank you, Kevin. Now we're ready for closing statements, and we'll go in the order of David, then Ferenc, then Emily, then Kevin, then Gus. David, go ahead.
Let me just thank you so much for this opportunity to speak and obviously to communicate viewpoints. I think this has been an incredible forum. So thank you, Petra, for your leadership. I am the only candidate not taking corporate PAC money. I firmly believe in this county where I've lived that the inequities that exist need to be fixed. And that's going to take bold and audacious leadership. It's going to call for a Green New Deal. It's going to call for Medicare for all. It's going to call for community college for all. Our middle class is virtually gone. My goal is to make sure when elected to Congress that I think about San Francisco County and San Mateo County, and that we're able to get the district the funding and dollars so that children like my children can grow up here and stay here. I am concerned about the state of San Mateo County and San Francisco County. It's become a class of those who have and those who have not. I want to fight for the underdog, and I want to be your voice in Congress, and we can restore equity and hope back to CD 15. Thank you so much for the opportunity again. And thank you to our nonprofits who do the day-to-day work. You guys are doing an exceptional job. Much appreciative. Thank you, Petra.
Thank you, David. Franz?
Well, again, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for organizing this. And just for the record, I believe I am the only candidate that is not taking any contributions from anyone. I'm running a very low budget campaign because I do believe in free advertising and the word of mouth. And I do believe that I have a very strong case, and the United States Constitution is backing me up. And I hope more and more people will see that we really need to change only one thing, and one thing only, to take the power back from the Federal Reserve that was delegated to them in 1913 by that act, which is called the Federal Reserve Act, which I still consider the biggest mistake that Congress made back in those days. And we don't have to follow in those footsteps. We could take control of the money creation And then we could actually solve all of these problems that we talked about in the past hour and a half, because there are plenty of issues. But we have to agree on something, that the lack of funds are the lack of funds are the biggest thing that's stopping us to do good. We could eradicate homelessness within 6 months. I truly believe that, if we have enough federal funds, we could build enough housing. We could actually have free education, even at higher level, not just community colleges. And we could have a free healthcare, once we control the money supply, once we don't have to borrow money. A sovereign nation should not owe money to anyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Our country and our district is a really important crossroads, and we do need creative and bold leadership. We need to tackle real issues. We got to get to universal health care. We've got to have a higher national minimum wage. We have to invest in affordable childcare and early learning and so many other things we talked about today. But we can't just yell and scream about it and bluster about it. We need to send people to Washington who can build the unlikely coalitions to get that done. And my broad life experience, the path I have walked enables me to do that, I believe, better than anybody else that's running, and to fight for a more just and sustainable economy and society. And part of achieving more justice and equity is making sure we have different perspectives and different representation. And in Congress today, we only have 27% who are women. We're over 50% of the population. I don't want to see us lose more representation for women when Congresswoman Spear retires. We also have an all-time low since World War II of veterans who are in Congress. Only 17% have military experience. Back when I was growing up in the 1970s, 73% of our Congress had military experience. I bring both of those assets, and with all the issues we face today, particularly with women's economic power and women's reproductive freedom, we need women on the front lines fighting for things like pay equity, for affordable childcare, for our reproductive freedom. It now is a critical moment where we need that voice, that authentic voice in Washington, D.C. So those are critical issues I will fight for. I hope when you cast your vote, you're assessing the candidates who you think has the ability and has shown courage throughout their lifetime to stick their neck out, do hard things, have courage, and build coalitions to get things done, and who has the potential to be the most highly impactful member of Congress in the long run. I sincerely hope to earn your vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. Kevin?
Thank you, Petra. Thank you, organizers. Thank you to my fellow candidates for the opportunity. The Peninsula is the epicenter of the affordability crisis, with housing out of reach for so many, healthcare costs, childcare costs, higher education ever more expensive. You need someone who will bring your concerns to Congress and fight for an economy that truly works for all of us. You will have an absolute warrior for democracy, voting rights, free and fair elections. In the battle between autocracy and democracy, democracy must win. I will bring deep experience and proven leadership to the Congress, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit this afternoon about why I'm the most qualified voice to represent you at the Capitol. We must rebuild a politics of the common good and have a democracy that delivers, truly delivers for the people. I am proud to bring a decade of service and experience from the legislature and 5 years before that in local government to this race. I believe qualifications still matter when you're running for Congress when it comes to governing. I've been preparing much of my professional life for this very role. I am going to run a positive, issue-oriented campaign, a kind of campaign that this district deserves, and I'm going about doing that. I'm grateful for the opportunity. I look forward to delivering for this district when I represent you in Congress, and please know you will have a deeply committed public servant representing your interests above all other interests, and I would be honored to have your support. Great to see you all, and thank you for the attention on this race.
Thank you, Kevin. Gus?
Thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. I want to start by saying I think the people of the 15th District are blessed to have 5 thoughtful people to choose from in this upcoming election. I think you'll find that's actually pretty rare in politics these days. But if you want to make real progress on issues like voting rights, like immigration, then of the 5 of us, only I can deliver the thing that on a practical level you most need, which is support within the Republican Party. On every issue that we discussed today, I can identify areas of common ground, things that could resonate for both Democrats and Republicans. And I've built my entire campaign around the idea of common ground in ideas like a conservative universal healthcare plan and a conservative plan to actually address climate change. And I have persuaded my fellow Republicans to support me in that. As your congressman, I'm willing to go to bat for those areas of common ground on policy, and I'm willing to do the heavy lifting here in the district to help you and your organizations be more successful in your work. And that work, I believe, is important and it is meaningful. And as a conservative, watching private organizations and private citizens coming together to solve problems really resonates for me. And what I hope is that today you heard some things that resonated for you. And if you did, you may find you hear two voices, a voice that says, wow, I kind of liked what Gus had to say. I kind of want to vote for him. And then another voice that says, but he's a Republican. That voice that says, I kind of want to vote for Gus, that's your heart talking. I'm asking you this June 7th and November 8th, vote your heart. Vote Gus, give me 2 years, and let me show you what I can do with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gus. I'd like to sincerely thank all of the candidates for taking the time to be with us today, for sharing your views on the issues that are so important to our communities, and for sharing your plans for representing us in Washington. I also want to acknowledge and thank our co-hosts, San Francisco Peninsula People Power, the Center for Independence of Individuals with Disabilities, Bellhaven Action, Peninsula for Everyone, PBRC, Bay Area Community Health Advisory Council, and a special thank you to our interpreters as well. We look forward to being able to offer this recording both in English and in Spanish. I want to thank all of you, of course, for attending and invite you to share the recording with your friends and join us at our upcoming candidate forums, which can be found at our website. And just have a great day. We really appreciate it. June 7th is the last day to vote. You can vote as soon as you get your ballot, which should be starting around May 9th when vote centers open. So thank you all and have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Petra.